A retired black veteran moved to a quiet neighborhood for peace. Then one day, a self-proclaimed HOA task force pulled a taser on her doorstep. They had no clue who they were messing with, and what was about to come crashing down. Tasha Merriweather was wiping down her kitchen counters when she heard it. A sharp, deliberate knock. Not frantic, not casual. Intentional. Like someone announcing control before they even spoke. She glanced at the wall clock. 6:43 p.m. Sun still out, birds chirping somewhere nearby, and her German shepherd, Ranger, didn't even bark. That was the first sign something was off. Ranger always barked when he sensed attitude. She opened the door halfway, careful to keep the security chain latched. 3 men stood on her porch, dressed like they'd just walked off a cheap TV set. Tactical vests, knee pads, cargo boots. One even had mirrored sunglasses despite the fading light. They weren't cops, but they wanted to look like they were. The man in front, tall, tan, goatee trying to cover a weak chin, held a laminated card that looked like it came from a library printer. "Evening, ma'am. We're with Willow Haven's Homeowners Compliance Task Force. You've got a violation." Tasha raised an eyebrow, unmoved. "Compliance Task Force?" "Yes, ma'am," he said, nodding like he believed it. "We patrol for code issues, and right now we've got you logged for a flag issue." She let the word hang in the air. "A flag issue?" "Yes, ma'am. American flag hung at an incorrect angle. Code 14B. It's got to be perfectly vertical, no slant, and it can't be under any eaves. Ours is a patriotic community. We take this stuff seriously." Tasha didn't even look back at the flag. She didn't need to. Her dad taught her how to handle Old Glory with respect back when she was 9. He'd served. She served longer. "You got credentials?" He puffed his chest. "Right here." He flipped the card up closer. Tasha leaned slightly forward. Still blurry. No barcode, no city or county seal. Just the Willow Haven logo, a flag, and some printed words. "Sir, that's not a legal badge." "That's all we need in Willow Haven, ma'am. HOA approved. We're authorized to issue citations and escorts for non-compliance." Tasha narrowed her eyes. "Escorts?" "Yes, ma'am. Sometimes it's necessary." The second man, shorter, bald, chewing gum like it was personal, chimed in. "Look, you can come with us down to the HOA office and we'll clear it up. Or you can make this complicated." "Where's the HOA office?" she asked. "Off Sycamore, near the pool." "That's a storage shed," Tasha said flatly. "I've lived here 6 months." The third guy, muscular, neck tattoos half hidden under his collar, shifted and said nothing. But he unhooked something from his belt. A taser. He didn't aim it, but he made sure she saw it. Tasha didn't flinch. "I'm gonna need you to step out, ma'am," Goatee said. "Let's not make this hard." She took a long breath. Cool and quiet. "You bring a taser to talk about a flag?" "No, ma'am. We bring a taser for compliance." That was when Ranger appeared behind her, tail still, body alert. He didn't growl. He didn't need to. She unlatched the chain and stepped fully outside, letting the door click shut behind her. She stood with both feet firmly on the welcome mat that read, "Come correct or don't come at all." "You said code 14B. Goatee nodded. "Never heard of it," she said. "Because it doesn't exist. And unless you're sworn law enforcement or hold a valid state compliance badge, what you're doing right now, on my property, is impersonation. And that's a felony." Gum Chewer started fidgeting. Tattoo Neck muttered something under his breath. Goatee, still trying to stay alpha, lifted the taser slightly, hand stiff. "I'm gonna have to escort you, ma'am." She stepped forward, face inches from his. "You sure about that?" That's when they heard a car door close, then another. From the driveway next door, 2 men emerged, then a third from the backyard, another from behind a parked SUV, all of them walking slowly toward the porch. Calm, intentional, silent. Goatee turned to look, then froze. Who are they?" Tasha smiled for the first time that evening. "Old friends. We're having a reunion." But none of them came to party. They came to protect her. She didn't look like what they expected. That's what Tasha Merriweather had come to understand in her 38 years. On the outside, she was calm, soft-spoken, lived alone, wore hoodies and sweats, rode her bike to the corner market. She could blend into any neighborhood, any crowd, and that's exactly how she liked it. But back in 2011, she was flying over Kandahar in a Black Hawk, leading a 4-woman team into hostile terrain with nothing but instincts, grit, and a mission. No backup, no second chances. That was the part people didn't see. She didn't talk much about her time in the US Army Special Forces. It wasn't a secret. She just didn't need people looking at her like she was some kind of exhibit. After 16 years and too many near misses, she left on her own terms. Honorable discharge, 2 Bronze Stars, a reconstructed shoulder, and more quiet memories than she'd ever speak out loud. She chose a new life, cybersecurity, working from home, building firewalls instead of jumping out of planes. She bought a modest single-story house in Temecula, California, tucked between rolling streets and weekend wineries. It was peaceful. And for a woman who'd seen enough conflict to last 5 lifetimes, peace was worth more than money. The neighborhood had seemed friendly enough at first. A few waves, a couple of curious glances, a welcome basket that smelled like store-bought cookies. She wasn't naive. She knew what it meant to be the only black woman on a block of aging retirees, golf dads, and Instagram moms. But she didn't expect trouble. She didn't expect people pretending to be law enforcement. Not here. She met her neighbors, helped carry groceries for an elderly couple 2 houses down, even attended one of the monthly HOA barbecues, just once. That was enough to see who pulled the strings. Rick Dalton, the man who just pointed a taser at her, loud, always wore boots even when it was 95 degrees, called himself a patriot every 10 minutes, claimed he'd almost enlisted once back in '89, but the system was corrupt. The moment he opened his mouth, she knew what he was. The self-declared enforcer of imaginary rules. The kind of man who confuses power with purpose, who creates his own systems when no one gives him authority. And worst of all, he had followers. But Tasha had something Rick didn't. Real discipline, real experience, and real allies. Her former unit, the Red Line 5, wasn't just a group of badass women. They were family. They'd been through firefights, ambushes, long nights in places where silence could kill you. They didn't just watch each other's backs. They knew when one of them needed backup, which is exactly why they were in town. 6 months earlier, Tasha sent a group message. Thinking of planting roots, house in Temecula. Come visit if you're near. That's all it took. Now they came out every few months. Catch up, share stories, eat too much. Laugh about the time Natalie used lipstick to fix a GPS, or how Drea once neutralized a threat in heels and a dress. That week, the whole crew happened to be there, reunited. No weapons, no mission, just friendship and memories. But Rick Dalton didn't know that. He didn't ask questions. He assumed things, and acted like he owned the sidewalk. What he didn't understand, what so many like him never do, is that strength isn't about volume. It's about presence. It's what happens when a woman like Tasha walks out of her home, gets stared down by a weapon, and doesn't blink. And when her team began stepping out one by one, without a word, that wasn't posturing. That was instinct. That was protection. One of them, Drea, leaned on the fence, arms folded. "Problem here?" she asked, like she was asking for salt. The fake cops didn't answer. Tasha didn't need to raise her voice. "I'm not going anywhere with you," she said clearly. "And if you take one more step onto my property, we'll be the ones making arrests." But Rick wasn't ready to back down just yet. Not until things got even more real. Rick Dalton had the kind of face that turned red for no reason. Right now, it was crimson. He glanced down at the taser in his hand, then back at the growing crowd around Tasha's lawn. What had started as a 3-man bluff was now turning into something much harder to control. Neighbors peeked from blinds. A teenager across the street was filming with his phone, and Tasha's former unit looked like they'd seen this kind of situation before, because they had. Still, Rick held his ground. "You're in violation," he barked again, a bit less steady this time. "You can't just… Your flag's crooked. We have standards." Tasha stepped forward, calm as ever. "You're making up codes. That's not how this works." "We represent the HOA," Rick insisted, waving his arms like a traffic cop. "We're community security. That's in the bylaws." "No," said Drea, still leaning against the fence. "It's not. I read them this morning after your crew parked their little golf cart in front of my friend's driveway." Tasha turned to him. "You've been harassing people." Rick's eyes narrowed. "Nobody's harassing anyone. We just like to keep the neighborhood in order." "By threatening women with tasers?" asked Leah, the smallest in the group, but possibly the scariest. "You do realize you're armed, on private property, without any legal authority. That's not order. That's intimidation." The shorter man, still chewing gum like it owed him money, muttered, "We ain't the only ones keeping an eye out. This place has gone downhill. We're just trying to stop it before it gets worse." Tasha stared at him. "Worse for who?" Silence. The quiet around them thickened. A few more doors creaked open across the block. An older Latina woman walked out with a folding chair and set it on her lawn, watching without saying a word. "You see that?" Leah said, tilting her chin toward the woman. "That's what you call community. She didn't need a vest or a badge to protect her neighbors." Rick didn't respond. His bravado was cracking, but he still had that stubborn twitch, the kind that comes from someone who's never been told no and couldn't process it now. "You're not law enforcement," Tasha said again. "You have no jurisdiction, no training, no authority, and no right to show up at someone's home armed and issuing fake citations." "I got every right," Rick snapped. "You're lucky I didn't call the real cops." "You should," Tasha replied. "Because I already did." Rick blinked. "What?" "I called them when you pulled up. I don't know who you are. I don't know what you're pretending to be. But when someone comes to my door with a weapon and a fake badge, that's a threat." The chewing stopped. Tattoo Neck shifted again. Gumchewer turned pale. Tasha tilted her head. "Let me guess. You thought I'd be alone, right? Figured I'd get scared. Maybe back down. Maybe let you bluff your way through whatever mess this is." Rick opened his mouth, but nothing came out. "You see a woman like me," she continued, "and you think quiet means weak. That calm means scared. You don't ask questions, you just try to control." Tattoo Neck finally spoke, voice low. "We should go." Rick hesitated. "We don't just leave. That sets a precedent." Leah stepped off the porch. "You already set a precedent. You came to the wrong house." And then Tyrans. Faint at first, but getting closer. Rick didn't move. "You're still holding that taser," Drea pointed out. Slowly, like a man waking up from a dream, Rick lowered it. The golf cart was still parked crooked at the end of the driveway, its tiny red light blinking like a joke. Tasha looked past him, then back. "You might want to get that off my property." Rick finally took a step back. Gumchewer followed, fast. Tattoo Neck didn't speak again. They climbed into the golf cart, awkward and stiff, like people who just remembered how fragile they really were. But the sirens weren't for show. The real cops were on their way. And the story was far from over, because now it was time to find out who these men really were. The golf cart didn't get far. 2 blocks down, it was cut off by a black and white cruiser from the Riverside County Sheriff's Department. The moment the deputies stepped out, it was clear they weren't here to play mediator. One of them, Deputy Flores, mid-40s, stocky, no nonsense, walked straight toward the men. His eyes locked on the taser still loosely strapped to Rick's thigh. "Hands where I can see them. Now!" Tattoo Neck raised his arms. Gumchewer nearly tripped trying to comply. Rick tried to keep cool, but his hands trembled as he lifted them shoulder high. "We're neighborhood security," Rick said quickly. "We're part of the HOA." Flores didn't blink. "Do you have law enforcement credentials?" "We don't need them. It's private property. We're authorized by the board." Deputy Flores glanced back at his partner, who was already scanning the fake IDs. "These aren't official anything. And that taser..." He nodded at Rick. That makes this a whole different conversation. Back at Tasha's house, the rest of her team stood near the porch, arms crossed. Tasha had moved to the end of the driveway to meet the deputies as they approached. She handed Flores her phone, where the entire interaction had been recorded, from the first knock to the moment the taser came out. I don't want to escalate, she told him. But this wasn't some misunderstanding. He threatened me, on my porch, with a weapon. Flores took the phone and nodded once. We're gonna need statements from you and your guests. Tasha gestured to the others. They're former military. They'll cooperate. That caught the other deputies' attention. All of you? Special forces. Leah added. Retired. Visiting for a few days? The deputy exhaled, a little impressed. Guess he picked the wrong house. Flores took a step toward the porch. Mind if I ask what started all this? Tasha folded her arms. He said my flag wasn't hung correctly. Claimed there was some HOA code violation. Then told me I had to go with him. That's not a citation. That's a kidnapping attempt. Drea said flatly. Leah added, and you might want to check his so-called patrol records. I'm guessing this isn't the first time he's done this. By the time Rick and his buddies were in the back of the cruiser, handcuffed and quiet, neighbors had fully emerged. People were whispering. A few asked Tasha if she was all right. One man apologized for not stepping in sooner. An older black couple across the street walked over with a folding tray of lemonade. We've had problems with those three for months, the woman said, shaking her head. But nobody wanted to be the first to report it, not until now. Deputy Flores came back, clipboard in hand. We'll be filing impersonation charges, unlawful detainment, and a weapons violation. We're also reaching out to the HOA board to figure out who exactly gave them any kind of authority. They gave it to themselves, Leah muttered. Flores nodded like he wasn't surprised. Figures. Tasha gave her statement. So did her team. One by one they spoke clearly, calmly. No drama. Just facts. The truth didn't need exaggeration. It was bad enough on its own. As the last of the deputies finished up, Flores turned to Tasha again. You kept your cool. That helped a lot. She nodded. I've seen worse. He raised an eyebrow. From the way you handled this, I believe it. They shook hands, and the cruisers rolled off into the setting sun. Inside her house, Ranger finally relaxed and plopped down by the front door. Tasha sat on the couch, barely saying a word. The others joined her, each processing it in their own way. Nobody reached for a drink. Nobody laughed. It wasn't time for that yet. I don't think this is over, Drea finally said. Tasha agreed. It's not. We've got video. We've got witnesses. We've got momentum. Now we figure out what else they've been doing. And who's let them get away with it. But what they were about to uncover ran deeper than anyone imagined. The next morning, Tasha woke to emails. Not one or two. Dozens. Subject lines from neighbors she barely knew. Thank you. I saw everything. This happened to me too. She hadn't even posted the video yet. Word had just spread. Fast. She poured herself a black coffee and sat on the back porch, barefoot, laptop open. The sunlight hit the cedar fence as she clicked through each message, jaw tightening with every story. One neighbor said the same patrol accused her son of loitering in front of their own garage. Another shared how Rick Dalton tried to force his way into her home, claiming he needed to inspect her sprinklers. More than one described being filmed from a golf cart without consent. And every single one of them, every single one, was either black, Latino, or Asian. By noon, Leah had mapped out the pattern using the emails and a shared spreadsheet. 22 people in 8 months, she muttered, scrolling. All minorities, all called non-compliant for nonsense violations. Plants too close to the sidewalk, kids too loud, trash cans out too early. It's like they were hunting for excuses. Drea was pacing near the kitchen. Who lets 3 untrained men walk around pretending to be police in a suburb like this? Tasha already had the answer. The HOA board. She pulled out a thick packet of papers, the HOA's rules and bylaws. She'd requested a copy the week she moved in, and like everything bureaucratic, it was full of dense language and half-baked clauses. But tucked near the end of Section 6 was a phrase that stood out. The board reserves the right to establish volunteer community oversight groups for neighborhood order and decorum. Decorum. They gave Rick Dalton and his friends an open door, and then turned their backs once it got out of hand. Later that day, Tasha called for an emergency meeting with the HOA board. They didn't make it easy. The president, a woman named Connie Bradford, early 60s, big pearls, permanent scowl, told her it would have to wait until the next month's agenda. Tasha showed her the video. Suddenly, things moved a lot faster. By 6 p.m., they were sitting in the small community center behind the tennis courts. Folding chairs, cheap carpet. 6 board members sat behind a plastic table like royalty in lawn chairs. And facing them were 30 residents, many holding printouts, screenshots, and phones loaded with footage. Tasha stood in the front row, calm. She wasn't there to yell. She didn't need to. Connie cleared her throat. We've called this emergency session due to a situation involving the compliance group. Call it what it is, someone shouted from the back. A bunch of wannabe cops with weapons! Ma'am, we're addressing it, Connie said tightly. And I'd like to remind everyone that this is a volunteer group. They were acting in what they believed was the neighborhood's best interest. Leah leaned forward. That may be, but their belief was illegal. They impersonated law enforcement and targeted people based on race. That's not an error. That's a pattern. Connie glanced around like she was hoping for backup, but the other board members stayed quiet. Tasha stepped up. I served in multiple countries, under fire, in environments where rules kept people alive. And even there, we didn't make up authority when we didn't have it. We didn't corner civilians and flash fake badges. We respected the law, because we understood what happens when people stop doing that. A few heads nodded. One man clapped once, softly. Tasha continued, What's more dangerous than someone abusing power is a system that lets them. Connie shifted uncomfortably. We'll be suspending the compliance group until further notice. Not good enough. Tasha replied. You're going to release the names of every member, open up complaint records, and put in writing that no private citizen will ever be allowed to carry a weapon or pose as enforcement under this HOA again. Connie opened her mouth, then shut it. Someone behind her whispered something. She looked at Tasha, then at the crowd, then finally said, We'll draft the motion tonight. But for Tasha, it wasn't just about Rick. It was about what had been allowed to grow under everyone's noses. That same night, Tasha sent everything to her contact in the Riverside County DA's office, an old acquaintance from her military days named Brixton Hale. They hadn't spoken in a year, but one call and a few video files later, the case had a fresh set of legal eyes. Normally HOA stuff is civil, Brixton said over the phone. But this isn't normal. Impersonating a peace officer, that's criminal, especially with a weapon involved. Then charge them, Tasha said. We're reviewing everything, but it's not just Rick. If the board knew and looked the other way, his voice trailed off. Well, let's just say it might get bigger than a few neighborhood bullies. By morning, the story hit the local news. Not because Tasha sent it to anyone. Someone else must have tipped them off. A blurry cell phone video was already circulating on Facebook and Instagram. A caption underneath read, Fake HOA cops pulled taser on black homeowner. She's ex-military. Her team was ready. The comments section exploded. Some neighbors praised her. Others, hiding behind fake names and eagle profile pics, called her dramatic. Said she should have just complied. Tasha didn't care. She wasn't doing it for the internet. She was doing it for the woman 2 doors down who was too scared to mow her lawn before 9 a.m. because she'd been yelled at. For the teenager down the street who got followed for skateboarding too close to someone's mailbox. The next few days were a blur. Reporters knocked, but she didn't answer. Her team stuck around, helping her sort through the flood of testimonies pouring in. Some came in person. Some arrived anonymously. One woman dropped a handwritten letter in her mailbox. No return address, just a shaky script that read, Thank you for not letting them get away with it. My son was scared to walk to school. Tasha kept it folded in her desk drawer. Deputies began making quiet visits to homes where prior incidents had happened. They took statements, reviewed footage, and documented patterns. One deputy told her off the record that Rick and his friends were being investigated for previous harassment. and it wasn't looking good. Leah was the one who noticed it first. "Hey, look at this," she said, spinning her laptop toward the group. She had pulled up archived HOA meeting minutes from the past year, buried in a line item from 4 months earlier. Security volunteer group requests minor funds for reflective gear, badge printing, and patrol cart maintenance. Approved 4-2. Approved? Drea scoffed. They gave them money. Not just money, Leah said. They knew about the badges, the gear, everything. Tasha stared at the screen, quiet for a moment. So the board wasn't just ignoring it, they funded it. Leah nodded. Which makes them complicit. Tasha stood up. Then we take it higher. They scheduled a meeting with a civil rights attorney the next morning. Her name was Diane Covey. Sharp, grey-eyed, and the type who never wasted a syllable. Tasha liked her immediately. Here's the deal, Diane said after reviewing the footage and HOA documents. You've got a case for harassment, discrimination, and enabling criminal behavior. If this goes public in the right way, it could force a complete board re-election and trigger policy changes across multiple neighborhoods. Tasha leaned back. I didn't plan to start a movement. I just wanted it to stop. Diana smiled. Most movements start that way. Still, this wasn't about fame. Tasha wasn't interested in speeches or social media wars. She wanted accountability, transparency, safety. She wanted to live in a place where no one felt small on their own porch. That night, she gathered her team around the kitchen table. The sun was down. Ranger was curled up under the table, snoring lightly. Tasha looked at each of them. We came here to rest. Now we're in the middle of something bigger. Leah smirked. Feels familiar. Drea nodded. Only difference is, we're not in uniform this time. Tasha took a slow breath. Maybe not, but we're still fighting. But this time, the enemy wasn't across an ocean. It was on the same street, behind HOA rules and golf carts. Rick Dalton's arrest made headlines for a day, but the real mess unraveled quietly behind closed doors. 2 of the HOA board members resigned within a week. No press releases, no formal explanation. Just vanished names from the website and a lot of silence when neighbors asked questions. Connie Bradford, still clinging to her title, claimed they left for personal reasons. But Diane Covey knew better. They're lawyering up, she told Tasha during their second meeting. They knew. Maybe not everything, but enough. Enough to know this whole compliance team was a ticking time bomb. Over the next 10 days, a clearer picture formed. Rick Dalton wasn't just playing dress-up. He'd formed an actual LLC called Community Order Services, listing himself as CEO. The address? A P.O. box in nearby Menifee, California. The company had no state contracts, no legal authority, and no employees besides Rick and his 2 longtime friends, Nolan Sharp and Greg Hunsley. But that didn't stop them from printing badges, buying tactical gear online, and collecting what they called voluntary neighborhood safety fees. You mean extortion, Leah had muttered when they read the file. The craziest part? Some residents had actually paid. Rick had passed out flyers, knocked on doors, even offered premium patrols for people who signed up for a monthly donation. Tasha found a woman 3 blocks down who showed her one of the flyers, full of typos and a fake website, but just official looking enough to fool someone trying to stay safe. And that's who Rick had targeted. People who just wanted to feel safe. People who thought a few men in vests would protect their property, not harass their neighbors. One single mom said she gave Rick $30 a month just to make sure he wouldn't mess with her kids. Another couple admitted they paid once, then stopped when Rick made passive-aggressive comments about their granddaughter visiting too often. He created a system of fear, Diana told the group, then convinced people to pay for the illusion of peace. Tasha sat with her arms folded, jaw tight. That's not security. That's a shakedown. It was deeper than fake enforcement. Rick had built a mini-regime, one based on paranoia, intimidation, and the quiet approval of those who didn't want to rock the boat. Connie Bradford had signed off on more than just funding. Her email was linked to several board communications approving uniform purchases. One thread between her and Rick read, "Keep it visible. They need to know someone's watching." That was enough for Diane to act. She filed a formal civil suit against Rick, the two other fake enforcers, and the HOA board members who had knowingly supported them. She also sent everything to the California Department of Consumer Affairs, which began their own investigation into the unauthorized security operation. News spread again, louder this time. The story made it to the San Diego Union Tribune and a segment on late-night public radio. The narrative was no longer just about a woman defending herself on her porch. It was about what happens when a community lets fear fester behind fences and bylaws. When power gets handed to the loudest person with a clipboard. Tasha kept her routine, walked ranger, answered emails, declined interviews. But she noticed how the street changed. People waved more. The couple next door, who once barely nodded, brought over a pie and apologized for not saying something sooner. A teenager who used to skateboard past her house started walking his little sister home from school, confident for the first time in months. And then there was Dolores, the elderly woman who lived across the street with her oxygen tank and ceramic lawn frogs. She rang Tasha's doorbell one afternoon, pressed a folded piece of paper into her hand, and whispered, "Took a long time to feel safe here. You made it faster." Inside the paper was a photo of her husband, a retired Air Force mechanic, holding an American flag on their wedding day. Tasha kept that one too, but there was still one final thing left to say, and Tasha knew the whole neighborhood needed to hear it. The community center smelled like folding chairs and old carpet glue, but that night, it was standing room only. Over 60 people filled the room, some with arms crossed, some holding coffee cups like shields, all waiting to hear what Tasha Merriweather had to say. She hadn't planned to speak publicly. It wasn't her thing. But after everything, the threats, the charges, the stories from neighbors who had stayed quiet for too long, she felt like silence wasn't an option anymore. Connie Bradford wasn't there. She'd stepped down 2 days earlier with a generic resignation email about focusing on family. No apology, no explanation. Just like that, the woman who let Rick Dalton run unchecked vanished from the very meeting hall where she'd once handed out Good Neighbor awards. Tasha stood near the front, not on the makeshift stage, not behind a podium, just on the floor, next to the row of chairs like everyone else. No script, no slideshow, just her voice. "I moved here for peace," she began. "After years of serving overseas, all I wanted was to feel normal again, to walk my dog, to fix up a house, to be left alone." The room was quiet. I didn't expect much. Just respect. Safety. Space. That's all. She looked out at the crowd. Young families, elderly couples, a group of high schoolers in the back, still in soccer gear. All watching. "But what I got instead," she continued, "was a group of men knocking on my door with fake authority and real aggression. I stayed calm because I've had to stay calm in situations that were a lot more dangerous than 3 men and a golf cart." A few people chuckled. It broke the tension, just slightly. "But the point isn't that I was trained. The point is that I shouldn't have to be. You shouldn't need a military background to feel safe at home." She let that sit for a beat. What happened to me wasn't just about one man with a taser. It was about who let him feel powerful, who looked the other way when he crossed the line, and who stayed quiet because it was easier. She didn't point fingers. She didn't raise her voice. And I know some of you didn't know. I also know some of you did, and thought maybe it wasn't your place, or maybe you'd be next. Several people looked down. A woman near the front wiped her eye. "Well, now you know," Tasha said. "And now you have a choice. Because this neighborhood doesn't fix itself. The rules don't change unless you challenge them. And safety doesn't come from uniforms or flashlights. It comes from the way we treat each other." She took a small breath. "I'm not asking for praise. I'm asking for presence, for accountability, for neighbors who pay attention, not just to what makes them feel comfortable, but to what might make others feel unwelcome." There was a pause. Then slowly, hands began to clap. One row, then another. It wasn't the kind of applause meant to flatter. It was the kind that meant people heard her, understood her, maybe even felt a little convicted. Tasha stepped back, nodded once, and sat down. Afterward, people lined up to shake her hand. Some just said thank you. Others told their own stories. Small violations that didn't seem worth reporting. Until now. A few asked how they could help. Leah leaned in at one point and whispered, "You ever think maybe you were supposed to end up here?" Tasha didn't answer right away. She just looked around at all the people finally talking to one another like neighbors. "I don't know," she said. "But I'm here now. And I'm not leaving." But before she could finally rest, there was still one last ripple waiting. The impact of what came next. The lawsuit moved slowly. They always do. But little by little, the layers peeled back. Rick Dalton pled guilty to impersonating an officer and unlawful use of a stun gun. His plea deal included a $15,000 fine and 6 months of house arrest, which felt generous considering the fear he caused. But the DA's office made it clear this was only the beginning. Greg Hunsley and Nolan Sharp faced similar charges, though neither had been as aggressive as Rick. They both settled with probation, mandatory community service, and court-ordered public apologies to the people they harassed. The real shift, though, came within Willow Haven itself. The board was dismantled, every seat opened for election. And for the first time in the neighborhood's history, a diverse slate of residents ran, and won. Teachers, retirees, a local EMT. Even Drea ended up on the ballot. No more secret votes, no more closed-door decisions. Every meeting was live-streamed and archived. No exceptions. Tasha refused to run, but she was always nearby, offering advice, making calls when she noticed something off. Walking Ranger passed the playground and giving a quiet nod to the high school senior who once told her he didn't feel safe skating on his own block. The flag? It stayed exactly where it was, mounted at an angle on her porch, just like her father taught her. No one ever questioned it again. One afternoon, 2 months after the town hall meeting, Tasha sat in her backyard, sipping mint tea, laptop on her lap. An email had just come through. A teacher in another county asking if she'd speak at a school about community safety and self-advocacy. Tasha smiled. She didn't say yes. Not yet. But she didn't delete the email either. Leah joined her outside with 2 lemon popsicles. "You realize," she said, handing one over, "this whole neighborhood's different now." Tasha took a bite. "Good different?" Leah shrugged. "Different's a start." There was quiet between them, but it wasn't tense. It was the kind that came after the hard part, after the storm. Later that evening, she walked over to Dolores's house, the elderly neighbor with the oxygen tank and the lawn frogs. Dolores had invited her over for chili. The old woman served it in thick ceramic bowls and didn't hold back on the spice. Between spoonfuls, she said, "You know what I noticed? People don't close their doors as fast anymore." Tasha nodded. "They're not scared," Dolores smiled. "They're learning not to be." That, to Tasha, was the real win. Not the fines, not the headlines, but the small things. The slow, stubborn return of trust between people. A neighborhood that no longer pretended to be safe, but started working to become safe. She hadn't wanted to be the face of anything, but if her story helped one person speak up, helped one community stop sleepwalking through injustice, then it mattered. Because silence, Tasha realized, is where men like Rick Dalton thrive. They hide behind apathy, behind "not my problem," behind the comfort of pretending nothing's wrong. But not anymore. When people see something and say something, it shifts everything. Not overnight, but enough. She stood up to fake authority. She stood for herself, for her neighbors, for the kid with the skateboard, and the mom who paid to be left alone. She never asked to be a hero. She just didn't back down. And maybe that's the lesson. You don't need a title or a badge to make things right. You just need a voice that refuses to be ignored. So if you're watching this, and you've seen something wrong in your neighborhood, your workplace, or even your family, speak up. You don't need to be trained. You don't need to be fearless. You just need to be willing. Because change doesn't start with big moments. It starts with someone like you saying, "Not here, not today." If this story moved you, hit subscribe. Because more voices need to be heard, and you never know when yours might be the one that makes all the difference.